The first step for our drawing today is going to be to find the middle of our paper and put a small, very light dot in the very center of your paper, or as close as you can get to the center. Then below that dot, we're going to make two more that are closer to the outer edge. So it makes like a tiny triangle, and make sure to put it close to the edges of your paper. The next step is we have to create a hill shape or a rainbow shape that connects all of those lines over the top like this. If you look at this cup, we have to create the top of our planter, and it looks open. Now this creates this oval shape called an ellipses. So we are going to go create a smile line in the other direction, but basically it's going to end up being one large, very thin oval going all the way around. And we will be erasing pieces of this, so make sure to draw lightly. And then we're going to add our planters. So whatever shape planter you would like to have on your paper, you can add. I'm going to make mine this cauldron type shape, but I'll give you a few examples of different types to draw today. I am also going to have these reference pages at your table. You can look at the different planters on here or the different cacti for when we're ready to draw those. But these will be at your seat so that you can look at them, and it will help to decide which ones you would like to draw. I'll leave this image up for a while and give you time to draw your planter, and then we'll move on to our cacti. So now I'm going to jump into the different types of reference pages you have. That first one was a simple version, and then both sides have this version. And then lastly, we have the more difficult, challenging version of cacti, and you get to choose whichever one you would like to draw on your paper today. So let's go ahead and get started. We have this space to fill up. Now, if you want it to look like there is something closer to you, then you're going to draw it closer down to the bottom of your paper. So between that space, we have to pick a cacti. I'm going to go ahead and pick one like this one. And this one has 3 sets to it. So I'm going to start at the bottom. And I'm not touching the bottom of my vase. I'm just going to go right above it because this is going to be the closest one. And I'm going to draw out that bottom shape. And then the second shape. And if I have any lines in between this cactus, I'm going to erase them because I want this cactus to be in the front. So we're learning about overlapping for this lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and erase that line there so it looks like my cactus is overlapping the back part of this vase. And then I will move on to the second cactus. We have to have at least 3 in our planter. So you can have more than 3 cacti if you want, but I only require you to have at least 3. And keep in mind, your paper is very, very large, so you want to fill your format. Fill your space that you have, make it nice and tall because your paper is going to be very long. And I just added some flowers to this one to give it a little bit of detail. Now I'm going to draw the next one, and I want it to look like it is either in front or behind the first one that I drew. So I get to pick one from one of my reference pages. And these are really fun. These are more like succulents, but you can use anything from the reference pages you want. I'm going to go ahead and make this look like it's further back on my paper because I want it to look like it's behind the first one. So I'm going to draw it further towards the top of that section, that oval that we drew in the beginning. And it's going to go directly into that cactus. And I'll go ahead and draw out the pieces. Anytime I draw a line that hits the other cacti, I'm going to pick up my pencil and just pretend and imagine what that line would have looked like or where that line would have ended up behind this cactus. So you won't see that line right there because it's going to go behind the other cactus. This is going to create that overlapping that we're learning this week. And then, of course, if I have any lines on the inside of my cacti, I'm going to erase them so that it looks realistic. And now this cacti is in front of the back part of my planter, but behind that first cactus that I drew. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up because you know kind of how to work with this now. going to go ahead and draw some more. If I decide I want it to be in front, I need to make sure I draw it closer to the bottom of that section on my paper and erase all the lines on the inside. Add a few details and keep going. Now, I already have 3 cacti on my paper, so I do not have to add any more. You only have to have 3, but I do have a little bit of extra space, so I'm going to go ahead and add my last one. Erase all the lines on the inside, and I'll be ready to go. Add some flowers if you feel like you want to add some flowers, and then we're going to start adding texture. You could even add one of the small ones up here in the front that hangs over your planter, but you do not have to. Let's move on to the texture of our cacti. There's a few different ways you can do this one. This is what I call sprinkles, and you just add different almost hair-like texture, because we know that cacti are spiky or pokey, so we want to make that look realistic. Another type of texture, especially for these succulent, these long ones that look kind of like blades of grass, they just do long lines all the way down. So that's what I'm going to do for this one. I'm not going to add any spiky texture to it, but I'm going to go back and fill all of those in, put the texture I want there. On this small one, I'm going to separate it into sections and then add little X's along those lines to create that spiky texture. On my last one, I'm going to do the other form of texture, which is still the lines, but instead of X's, I'm going to create these little downward facing arrows or little V's. So those are a few different types of texture you can draw on your paper, or if you find another type from that reference sheet and you would rather draw that, that's okay too. Now this is extra. This is like bonus points. If you want to add some rocks or some texture to the inside of your pot, you can. We're going to be painting this area brown for the soil that is sitting in your planter. However, if you want to add some really fun texture or just a little bit of dirt, you can do that as well. For step 2 of this project, we're going to be using liquid watercolors and some paintbrushes and our water bowls to create a watercolor wash on the background of our paper. So we have to cover the entire paper using these liquid watercolors, and I have them in this little ice tray, and they come with lids, so this is a great way to keep our paints fresh. Now, to start off, we will always paint using just water first. This is specifically for liquid watercolors to create a wash. So I'm going to do this in sections. I'm going to paint just water and then watch how these colors just bleed around and they kind of spread out. And that is all thanks to the water that we already have on our paper. So it's very important that you add water first. I'm going to go in sections here. I'm going to add a little bit more, smooth out the edges, make sure you get all the way to the edges of your paper and to the corners of your paper. We're going to paint right on top of our drawing, and since our drawing is in pencil, it's not going to mess our drawing up. Once it dries, we'll be able to continue working on our beautiful painting. I'm going to go ahead and do the next section, fill my paper with water first, and add my color. I have a few drops down at the bottom, and I'm just going to kind of fix those up a little bit. It is important to not oversaturate your paper, so make sure you're not adding too much water, or you're going to start to see little puddles all over your paper, and they'll spill on the ground once we pick them up and bring them to the drying rack. Be careful not to mix too many colors together, or you'll end up getting a muddy gray color that you're not going to like. For step 3, we're going to be creating a value scale with those cacti that we drew last week and painted over. Now that our paper is dry, we are ready to get started. So with all of these different cacti, I want to have them all different shades and tints of green. So I'm going to start with just the basic hue of green. This is the green that came right out of the bottle. So I'm going to paint my first cactus this colored green. Now look how slow I am going to make sure that my craftsmanship looks very well, and I'm getting a very pretty line on the side. This is actual time, and then I'll speed it up whenever I get there. So just make sure you're taking your time because craftsmanship is for a grade. So I'm going to go in and fill this entire cacti with that hue base color of green. Now mine is the one all the way to the right, but you can pick any cactus on your paper. At the least, I want you to have 3 different shades or tints of green. So your hue color counts as 1, and then you will have at least 2 other ones. To create a tint, you're going to mix your base color of green with white. So we're going to go ahead and make our first tint, mixing those colors together with our paintbrush. And this first color will be the first light green. I'm going to go ahead and pick another cactus, and I will paint that cactus with this lighter tint of green. The more white you add, your color starts to become translucent a little more, so you might have to do a couple of coats, especially on these lighter ones. I'm going to go ahead and fill it over again. So now that I'm done with this tint, we have to have at least 1 tint and at least 1 shade, but overall that would mean we would have 3. And since you have to have at least 3 cacti, that would be perfect. But I have 4. So I'm going to make 1 more tint. I'm going to mix it with a little bit more white. I mixed the color that was already a tint with a little bit more white and got an even lighter shade of green, almost like a mint green. I'm going to have different types of brushes for you. You'll notice I grabbed a smaller brush. I switched it out because I have really small areas of this painting. So if you need to switch out your large paintbrush for a smaller one, you can grab that from the table. This one is a little more translucent than the other one, so it might take a couple of coats to make it nice and opaque looking. And then I'm going to start to create our next color, which is going to be a shade. So to create a shade, you're going to mix your hue color. So we're going to go back with the original green that we had earlier and mix it with a little bit of black. So this is going to create a shade that is slightly darker than your original hue of green. So you'll notice me mixing it on my little palette. We're just using some throwaway plates. So I'm going to mix that up, and it takes me a little while, but I'm going to go ahead and paint this very last cactus. You can see it up close here. It is like a hunter green color, and I'm going to do it to my very last cactus. And look how slow I'm going. This is real time, how slow I painted so that I could have very clean edges. Try not to booty scoot all over our paper, but it is important to go very slowly and take your time. Your craftsmanship is for a grade. I'm going to paint this entire thing. I'll speed it up so that you can get through this part, but this did take me a good little while. So here is our value scale cacti, and all we have left to do is the finishing details. We're going to paint the flowers this magenta pink color, and then we're going to paint brown for the inside of our planter. So moving on, the last thing that we're going to paint probably today, because we'll probably run out of time, is our planter. So our vase or whatever your cacti are sitting in, we're going to paint that one black. So if you already made your designs or your patterns, we're going to do those again. So we're going to paint over this with black over the entire thing. You'll notice I'm using a flat-headed paintbrush this time. It covers more surface area, but if you have a different shape that's easier to use a round paintbrush, you can grab one of those from the table. I'm going to paint the entire thing, and then we're going to have to let this dry. So let's go ahead and paint our magenta flowers. Paint magenta flowers real quickly, and I have this color. We don't have to mix this color. All your flowers, so we should have the bulk of it painted. And then the soil. So we have to paint the soil inside your pot. I'm going to paint right over my designs, my texture on the inside, because the last step of this project will be to go over everything with a Sharpie marker and outline all of the details. So our last painting will be the inside of our soil. fourth and final steps are going to be to create our patterns, our designs on our planters using oil pastels. So here is my cup that I keep my oil pastels in, and I'll make this zoom a little closer so you can see it. I'm going to draw out my designs. I can make a pattern. I can make a pattern with colors, a pattern with different types of lines, like these zigzag lines. Your hands will feel a little slimy after using oil pastels, but we're going to get some Germ-X and it'll help get that feeling off. It might not take away the color off of your hands, but you can always wash them in the bathroom later. So I'm going to finish all of these beautiful designs onto my planter, and these are Crayola brand oil pastels. They're very vibrant, even on this black background. And the last step is to use a permanent marker to outline all of your cacti and all of the designs. So this is to make sure that it is easy to see. It makes your design pop out. Please be careful and try and take your time. Your craftsmanship, once again, is for a grade. We're gonna add all of our details such as texture with a permanent marker. So the ones that kind of got hidden once we painted through it, we're gonna bring all of those back to life. So this is the last step. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that your cactuses look awesome. I can't wait to see them. And don't forget to outline even the bottom part, even the outside of your pot, even though you already painted it black. Okay, so thanks for joining.